Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome to the channel. UFC 290, Alexander Volkanovski versus Yair Rodriguez is right around the corner. It goes down on July 8th, and this card is absolutely stacked. I cannot wait for UFC 290. But there are some things that I do not like about UFC 290, and this is going to be my top 3 reasons I hate UFC 290. Now, I know there's going to be people down in the comments, how could you hate this card? I do this for every single pay-per-view, and I'll also be doing the top 3 reasons I love UFC 290, as well as countless other videos, including prediction videos. So make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. And if you enjoy these top 3 things I hate about certain cards, usually pay-per-views, do me a favor and like the video. I would greatly appreciate it. Now, how am I going to go into my list? I'm going to go from 3 to 1, 1 being the reason I most hate UFC 290. And even though this is a great card, I actually had some honorable mentions as well, which I'm going to start off with first. But before I get into any of those, do me a favor. Are there any reasons that you hate UFC 290? Let me know down in the comments before you even hear any of my reasonings. So starting off with the first honorable mention, and that is that Cameron Saaiman versus Christian Rodriguez was canceled. Christian Rodriguez pulled out. We got a replacement fighter, but it's just not the same. Cameron Saaiman versus Christian Rodriguez was an incredible bantamweight matchup. Both young, up-and-coming contenders in the bantamweight division. Saaiman has looked incredible in his few UFC fights that we've seen him. And Christian Rodriguez, coming off that big win against Raul Rosas Jr., I thought when the UFC announced this matchup, I thought it was a perfect fight between two kind of surging, unknown contenders who looked really good, but the bantamweight division is so stacked, nobody really even talks about them. And I just thought it was a very good fight. I was really looking forward to this matchup. And unfortunately, now it's not happening. Christian Rodriguez pulled out. They found a replacement, but it's not going to be anywhere near as good as the original fight. Now, the second honorable mention, and honestly, I thought about putting this on my list because this really is actually close to me. It hurts bad to even talk about it. But I thought, you know what? I have some other reasons I want to put on the actual list. But that is that UFC 290 may very well be the retirement of Robbie Lawler. Supposedly, according to Dana White, this will be his last fight. He is taking on Niko Price at UFC 290. And it just hurts to see the downfall of Robbie Lawler. I know it's been going on for years. He's lost 6 out of his last 8 fights. You know, the only fight he won was where Nick Diaz just quit mid-fight. His last fight, he looked good against Bryan Barberena, and then he got TKO'd at UFC 296. But it hasn't been the Robbie Lawler that I knew and loved. Robbie Lawler is one of my all-time favorite fighters. And it just hasn't been the same since he lost the title to Tyron Woodley. I will never forget that run that Robbie Lawler had to get to the title, then to get the title, then defending the title. I mean, he got a vacant title shot against Johnny Hendricks back at UFC 171. Incredible fight. If you haven't seen it, go watch it. He lost to Johnny Hendricks in a close decision. Then he went to be super active. He fought in May of 2014, then July of 2014, and he beat both Matt Brown and Jake Ellenberger and got another title shot against Johnny Hendricks in December of the same year. Johnny Hendricks hadn't even defended the title yet. That was his first title defense, was against Robbie Lawler. And he won the fight via split decision. And I'll never forget, it was in the 5th round. Johnny Hendricks was just holding on to his legs. And Robbie Lawler was the first time ever watching a fight where I felt like, okay, this guy is really trying to hurt his opponent. Robbie Lawler turned over, shifted his weight, and started throwing the most hellacious elbows to the rib cage of Johnny Hendricks. Johnny Hendricks let go. They ended up standing up, and Robbie Lawler just went after him for the last 10 seconds of the 5th round. And I really believe that exchange right there won Robbie Lawler the fight. And then he goes on to fight Rory McDonald at UFC 189. One of the most incredible performances I've ever seen. Great fight, one of the best fights of all time. Then he fights Carlos Condit at UFC 195. Crazy fight, incredible fight. A lot of people thought Carlos Condit won the fight. It could have went either way. It was an amazing matchup, back and forth, crazy fight between the two. And then unfortunately, he lost to Tyron Woodley back in July of 2016. Got KO'd in the 1st round and just hasn't been the same ever since. He's getting up there in age. He's 41 years old. According to Dana White, Robbie Lawler said this will be my last fight. I think he has a good opportunity to beat Niko Price and go out with a win. But I don't know, and that's what makes it worse. You know, if Robbie wins against Niko Price at UFC 290, I'm fine with it. I'm happy he's retiring. I don't want to see him taking any more damage. But if he loses, it's just going to be super depressing. And that's kind of why it wasn't on my list. Because if he does win and he does retire and he goes out with a win, I'll be very happy for Robbie Lawler. But it's just sad to see the kind of, just see the kind of fighter that Lawler was and see him fall off a cliff. And now he's most likely retiring at UFC 290. And I hope that he does. Moving on to my actual list, starting off with number 3 on the list. And that is that we have to watch Alonzo Menifield versus Jimmy Crute too. And I know somebody's saying, well, that fight at UFC 284 was incredible. Honestly, I don't want to see Jimmy Crute take any more damage. He just moves like he has CTE. And I don't even know if that makes sense. But if you watch him fight, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. He took a lot of damage against Menifield at UFC 284. The only reason it was a draw was because Menifield gassed out in the 3rd round. And basically, Crute just hung on for dear life, out-grappled him in the 3rd round. And in the course of out-grappling him, Menifield grabbed the cage. Mark Goddard took a point away. So then round 3 was essentially a 10-8 round for Crute. And then it ended up being a draw. So now they're running it back. Crute took a lot of damage in this fight. He got battered in the 1st round, battered in the 2nd round. And I know Menifield gassed out and he lost the 3rd round. He did grab the fence. I have no desire to see this fight ran back. And Jimmy Crute got KO'd by Jamal Hill, got TKO'd by Anthony Smith. And I know there was the leg injury or whatever. It was the nerve and he wanted to fight. But still, Jimmy Crute has taken a lot of damage over the past few fights. I mean, he got brutally KO'd by Jamal Hill. And I just don't want to see this fight ran back. I don't really see a necessity to have it ran back. And honestly, I felt like Jimmy Crute should have got cut after that performance. And I know that sounds crazy. All he did was really attempt to grapple, and really, he had some success early when he was fresh, but then he gassed out. The way he was moving, his defensive striking was horrible. I mean, he was getting clipped. I mean, it's not like Menifield was doing anything crafty or anything. He was just throwing big shots, and Jimmy Crute had no head movement. Neither guy really had a gas tank. Of course, Jimmy Crute was fresher in the 3rd round because Menifield almost finished him multiple times. And honestly, I just feel like this is one of those fights where I already know who's the better fighter. I think Menifield's going to brutally finish him in this rematch, most likely. Bare minimum, I think it's going to be a decision win for Menifield where he wins the first 2 rounds, brutalizing him again, and then maybe loses the 3rd round because he gasses out looking for a finish. But I mean, that fight, that 3rd round was horrific. I know people are going to talk about, well, the 1st round was really good. The 2nd round was really good. I don't even know if that's true. I mean, it was really Menifield just lighting him up and just busting his chin up and busting his eyes up. And then it was Crute shooting in on takedowns and occasionally getting one and controlling him for a little bit. It wasn't really a super competitive fight. You think a draw, you think it's a super competitive fight. I have no desire to see that again, and I wish it wasn't on UFC 290. Moving on to my number 2 reason that I hate UFC 290, and I'm sure some of you guys probably could have guessed this reason, and that is that Bo Nickal is on the main card of UFC 290. We will get Bo Nickal versus Trey Gore. If the bout order is currently correct, this will be the featured fight on the main card. That is ridiculous. Bo Nickal has literally beaten up nothing but grocery store cashiers. And I guess he went on to beat up the grocery store manager and Jamie Pickett. But even in that fight, he had to knee him in the groin to take him down. And you look at some of the opponents he's faced, 7-1, 3-0, 0-0. That's his MMA career outside of Jamie Pickett. He's fought nothing but garbage cans. And we're giving him another main card spot. The UFC, Bo Nickal has the ultimate Dana White privilege, and he's taking on Trey Gore, and this is a mildly interesting fight. It's a mildly decent test for Bo Nickal. But look at the rest of the card. I mean, you have Dan Hooker versus Jalen Turner. Could easily be above it. Robert Whittaker versus Dricus du Plessis could easily be above it. Sean Brady versus Jack Della Maddalena could easily be above it. I mean, there's so many fights that could easily be above this, and we got this featured fight on the main card. Bare minimum, or bare maximum, honestly, it should maybe open up the main card, not the featured fight on the main card. And I know people are going to say, why are you complaining about bout order? I just don't like when you have better fights before, fights that we don't really care about all that much. I know people are on the Bo Nickal hype train, but I mean, seriously, now we got to watch a very important lightweight fight between Dan Hooker and Jalen Turner. Jalen Turner trying to make his run in the lightweight division. We got to watch a number 1 contender middleweight fight between Robert Whittaker and Dricus du Plessis. And then we got to see Bo Nickal versus Trey Gore. It just doesn't make sense. It doesn't feel right. And I have no desire to see that matchup in the featured fight on the main card. And honestly, Sean Brady versus Jack Della Maddalena should take that spot. And the UFC has been known to shuffle around the bout order. I don't think they're going to put Bo Nickal on the prelims, but he deserves to be on the prelim. He's 4-0 in MMA. 4-0 in MMA. Only has one win in the UFC against Jamie Pickett, who we need in the nuts to get the win. He doesn't deserve to be on a main card like UFC 290. It's just Dana White privilege. They're just trying to promote him on a big card. Moving on to my final reason, my number one reason that I hate UFC 290. And this might shock a lot of you guys too. And that is that Robert Whittaker versus Dricus du Plessis is a number one contender fight. I don't care for this to be a number one contender fight. Why? Why? Who wants to see Whittaker? Do people really want to see Whittaker fight Adesanya for a third time? Because that's what's going to happen unless Whittaker suffers a catastrophic injury in the first round or somewhere in the fight when he's beating up Dricus du Plessis. That's what we're getting. We're getting Israel Adesanya versus Robert Whittaker 3. Who wants to see that? And then on top of that, whoever wins this fight, if they do in fact fight Israel Adesanya on the timeline that the UFC wants, they're set up for failure because they have UFC 293 in Australia. They want Israel Adesanya to headliner. And if this is going to be the number one contender, they have a very quick turnaround. They go from July to early September. That's not a long turnaround. That's 2 months essentially from fight to fight. So if they take any damage in this fight, they're set up for failure. And then on top of that, it's just a massive mismatch. I understand Dricus du Plessis is top ranked, and I understand they can't protect him from, the top of the middleweight division, but they couldn't give him somebody else at least more manageable. Maybe, I'm not saying the Khamzat Chimaev is more manageable, but at least if you booked him against a Khamzat Chimaev, you have a fresh contender coming out of that matchup. Or even Dricus du Plessis versus Sean Strickland. You would have a fresh contender come out of that matchup for Israel Adesanya. But still, either way, it sets them up for failure because they have basically 8-week turnaround, 9-week turnaround before they have to try to take on Israel Adesanya. That just doesn't make sense to me. And honestly, it's going to be Robert Whittaker. Unless Robert Whittaker gets injured in this fight, he will win this fight. Dricus du Plessis has had basically the picture-perfect ride to the top. He beat Brad Tavares. Okay, that's a decent win to kind of get into the top 15. Brad Tavares is like a top 15 gatekeeper. He beat Darren Till, submitted Darren Till. Darren Till's an absolute bum, was never good, was massively overrated. And he almost lost to Darren Till. Darren Till almost stopped him in the second round. He eventually gets Darren Till to quit in the third round with a neck crank. And then he beats the dead corpse of Derek Brunson. And Derek Brunson almost beat him too. Derek Brunson is now retired, or at least supposedly retired. I hope he doesn't come back from retirement. So it's been like a picture-perfect ride to the top of the division. And if they're going to give him this, basically, I don't want to say easy, but if they're going to give him this, path of least resistance, then why at the end are you going to book him up with Robert Whittaker? Because Robert Whittaker, if it wasn't for Israel Adesanya, Robert Whittaker would still be the champion. He's undoubtedly second best in the middleweight division. A lot of people were saying he would beat Alex Pereira. And Alex Pereira ultimately lost to Israel Adesanya in the rematch at UFC 287, got brutally KO'd. But you give Dricus du Plessis this ride to the top, and then you're booking him up with Robert Whittaker. And if by some chance Dricus du Plessis wins this fight, it's got to be a fluke. It's got to be a fluke. There's no way I can imagine Dricus du Plessis winning this fight that is not a fluke. Robert Whittaker is going to have to slip on a banana peel or something, or get injured, throwing a kick, or something weird is going to have to happen for Dricus du Plessis to win this fight. So essentially, you kill off a fresh contender in Dricus du Plessis by putting him up against Robert Whittaker. And now we got to watch Robert Whittaker turn around on 9 weeks, 8 weeks, and fight Israel Adesanya for a third time to a guy he's already lost via decision and also been finished by. I just hate so many things about this fight. It just makes no sense. And, I really wish they would build. I know they're trying to build some fresh contenders, but to come out outright and say this is the number one contender fight for the middleweight division, it just doesn't make sense to me. Maybe the UFC will go another route. Maybe if Abus Magomedov beats Sean Strickland, maybe they'll give him the fight. Maybe if Sean Strickland beats Abus Magomedov, which is this upcoming week, maybe they'll give him a title fight. Maybe if something happens with Paulo Costa versus Ikram Aliskerov, maybe Aliskerov gets a big win, but that's going to be the end of July, so he's going to have to turn around quick. Maybe they go another direction, but as it stands right now, I think this is going to be the number one contender fight unless they can't make it to UFC 293. And I would have just rather seen Robert Whittaker versus Khamzat Chimaev. And I know still we run into the same problem. If Whittaker wins, he's fighting him for the third time. But I just felt like there was much more compelling fights. And I basically think what's going to happen here is Dricus du Plessis is going to get exposed against Robert Whittaker. And then he's going to have a fall as fast as he rose through the middleweight ranks, because I don't favor him against a lot of these middleweights. I probably wouldn't pick him over any single middleweight in the top 15 right now, outside of Derek Brunson, who they have not removed from the rankings yet, because he's that bad. And honestly, I can't even imagine a scenario if Dricus du Plessis somehow flukes a win. We're going to have to hear the dumb MMA community as well as Adesanya and du Plessis argue about who's more African. I'm so tired of hearing about that dumb storyline. If you're eating into that storyline and that gets you excited for a fight, honestly, you're a clown. Because, I mean, who cares about that? Who even cares about that? I can't believe there is some people in MMA media kind of pushing that narrative. Oh, Adesanya said this about du Plessis and du Plessis said this about Adesanya. I don't care. I don't care about their nationality. I don't care about their ethnicity. I don't care about them arguing about which one represents where. That doesn't make for a compelling fight. Look at Dricus du Plessis' style. Look at his striking. And look at Israel Adesanya's. That is not a compelling matchup. That has brutal first round KO written all over it. And that's why Adesanya wants that fight. So if you hate Adesanya and you're hoping for the Dricus du Plessis matchup, I don't know what you're doing, because Dricus du Plessis is going to get brutally KO'd in that matchup. So that's why it was my number one reason. I just hate everything about this fight. There's so many different angles you can take and complain about this fight. But let me know what you guys think of all my reasons down in the comments. Is there anything I missed? Is there anything I'm overreacting about? Let me know what you think down in the comments. Don't forget to like the video. Don't forget to subscribe. And thank you so much for watching.